Well, it's Tuesday. And we're still doing scales and gauges.
We are.
And being silly.
That's what we do.
That's what we do. Last Tuesday, we talked about TT, which for me is, I love TT. It's just such a fascinating chapter in the history of model railroading. And we mentioned that a couple of things ganged up on TT. I think the number one thing that ganged up on TT was just the sheer popularity of HO.
Oh, probably.
When you're dealing with a juggernaut like that and all this cool product coming out, and it just became the size that everybody wanted.
You gotta have.
And then in 1962, Rapido came out with N-scale, 160th scale running on 9mm track.
Right.
And so that was half the size of HO. TT was almost exactly halfway between N and HO. And again, just looking at HO, or TT, it doesn't look that much different than HO. You look at N, and there's no question that you're looking at something substantially smaller.
Well, like this guy's stinking cute. Right?
Isn't that adorable? I shouldn't say adorable.
You can say adorable. There was a rule.
I will say adorable,
cute.
but you know, when guys hit a certain age, they can use words like that, and people just roll their eyes and go, "Well, okay, whatever."
I say stinking cute.
Stinking cute. It's adorable. This is actually a caboose off of my N-scale railroad. I used to have an N-scale railroad, and that's one of these are.
Hey,
these are off of that railroad.
All caboose are righteous.
They are. This one is. This was the custom paint job for my Bend Over and Sneeze railroad. Anyway.
Is that what the initials are on the side?
Yeah, I think people think BS stands for something else. Bend Over and Sneeze. Sometimes these goofy.
You don't want to do that when you're older.
Bend Over and Cough just didn't make sense, so I went with Bend Over and Sneeze. Anyway. There's a long tradition in coming up with stupid names for your railroad, and then after you do it, you regret it. Anyway, the Bend Over and Sneeze in N-scale. It was a really neat railroad. I enjoyed it.
And it went away after you sneezed.
I sneezed and it all blew over, yeah. But 1962, and it was kind of at first a European phenomenon, but it very rapidly became... excuse me? Did I say something silly? The European? I don't, am I missing it? European.
Right, after Bend Over and Sneeze.
Bend Over and Sneeze, European. Oh! Shh. Okay. I'm a little slow. Not downright stupid, just a little slow. European.
No, I'm not.
Not right this minute. Now, it's interesting to note that just as with HO, in Britain, instead of adopting that nomenclature HO, they called it 00.
Okay.
And it's slightly different scale, same gauge of track, but they made their scale slightly larger because the British equipment tends to be a little smaller, and then the motors fit better. So they did the same thing with N in Great Britain. They made the scale slightly larger, and they called it Tripolo.
Oh.
Tripolo.
Tripolo.
So you'll see that around from time to time. O, 00, and then Tripolo meaning 9mm track in a slightly larger scale. Well, that was around for about a hot minute. They still make a lot of that British equipment in the slightly larger scale, but they just call it N.
And
they dropped that Tripolo designation. But you'll run into it from time to time.
Well,
Tripolo.
N is easier to remember.
N is a lot easier to remember. And it's like, where are we going to go? Quadrupolo, sextupolo. I mean, I don't know where you would go with O.
Then there's that guy.
What would this be? Centerio? I don't know what it would be. But
a lot of O's.
That's a lot of O's to be lining up.
And we're familiar with that.
Oh! Where were we? N scale. Rapido. And, but because it's so teeny, and it's like you said, not only, the number one thing people were saying is, well, you can fit twice as much railroad in the same amount of space. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, it's just neat.
I like it because it is small.
It's just cool. It's just teeny, cool, and wonderful.
Yes, and detailed. For that teeny of a thing, I mean, look at that.
Yeah, that was one of the complaints and one of the reasons the TT people said this will never take off, because you can do anything in TT that you can do in HO. And the brass engines that came out and everything, they were almost indistinguishable from HO in terms of their operation and their detail and everything. And some of the early N, well, they'd kind of gotten out over their skis, if you will. They didn't run that well, because in 1962, the technology hadn't quite caught up to the shrinking. But very quickly, it just grew into its paws.
Oh, thank goodness.
And it's the second most popular scale now. Uh-huh. And it has threatened HO from time to time. There's a lot of people who just love N-scale.
Oh, I'm one of them.
And you're one of them.
I'm one of them.
And just the idea that it is just cool in its own right. And you can fit a lot more into a space.
Yeah, I just like the detail. I mean, look at this little caboose. I mean, look at the detail.
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, let's...
wow.
So Rapido did some European, and then they did some American, and this is Atlas. Mm-hmm. And when Atlas entered the market, which is a U.S. company, a lot of the Atlas stuff was really neat. And then Atlas came out with an FA that ran better than any locomotive I'd ever seen. I bought a couple of those FAs to run on my railroad, and it was just like, excuse me, it just cracked the throttle, and you could watch it. It was like watching the minute hand on a clock.
Wow.
It was just like, oh, it's gone another tie forward. It just crept along.
Wow.
And it's like, I can't get that kind of performance out of my HO stuff. And this is just, so it really took off. And this is Katie. This is one of their commemorative cars, the Katie. But they did their Katie couplers, which they were so well known for, and they did those in N scale. And if you bought the Katie cars, you could buy them with either the Arnold Rapido. Actually, it was Arnold who came out with, and then Rapido. The first company was Arnold, but that coupler, which is kind of a clunky coupler, it works really well, but it's kind of clunky.
That thing's teeny.
But that,
yeah,
is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so you could, and Katie offered conversion kits to convert all of your Atlas, all of your stuff. Yeah. And that's why our friends Bob and Karen Gerald with their N scale, I mean, that's just amazing. And
theirs is awesome.
Yeah, and their modular railroad that they take around to the shows is awesome. It's a legitimately cool scale, and you can, it's a challenge to do some things. If you wanted to scratch build a locomotive or something,
a little bit challenging.
But a lot of there's just off-the-shelf stuff that you can just buy if you just want to do detailing on stuff that you're just buying. And if you're mostly just into operating and stuff like that, well, just buy it and run it. Mm-hmm. And
they
it works.
They even have the buildings that go with them that you can put together. They're really cool.
Yep.
3D print.
And as long as you have really good eyesight and a steady hand, you can scratch build and stuff in this scale.
Yes.
You've been known to.
Well, yes.
So
steady hand.
Steady hand. Yeah. I kept graduating to larger and larger scales just because I don't have a steady hand. And anyway, that's another story. But anyway, N scale. That scale, which they said blew TT out, and you can make that argument that it did. Yeah. And there was a time when people said it's going to kill HO.
Oh.
And HO's popularity has kind of come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. But typically, it's always owned at least 50% of the model railroad market, and probably always will.
Right.
It'll lose some ground to O scale, and then it'll come back, and then it'll lose some ground to N scale, and then it'll come back.
Right.
But HO is certainly the most popular, and N scale is nipping at its heels as the second
I
most
think they're about
popular
equal.
size. So it's and there's so many newer products, track systems by HOe, and just people are putting DCC and sound systems. You can do anything.
That's so neat.
Even though it's teeny, tiny,
It still works.
you can still do anything in that size.
Right.
So it's cool.
It is.
Yeah. And it's just stinking cute.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
It's just fun. Anyway, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, do subscribe to the channel, and you can do that by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Are we ready? Zoink!
Right there.
The blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we'll see you here on Sunday.
We'll see ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.